Hello my beautiful people, how are you? Today's video is a love letter to the books that absolutely wrecked me in the best way possible in the month of April. I don't think I've talked enough about the books that I've been reading this month, and so I thought that we should fix that. Today I'm going to talk about books that I've read and loved during the month of April, and we're just gonna have a cozy book chat. Grab a coffee, tea, or whatever potion gets you through the day, and without further ado, let me walk you through the books I've read in the month of April. Here are all of them, not quite a lot, but as I always say, quality over quantity. There are some books that just scare you off, right? Either because of how huge they are or how much pressure everyone puts around reading those books. For me, one of those books was The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I was intrigued by it, but also completely paralyzed about picking it up. It felt like setting off on a long and not a very eventful adventure. So what did I do? I pretended to have read it. Yes, guilty as charged. But this month, I actually confronted my fears and finally read it. And honestly, I think I might have loved this book more than I did East of Eden, which is insane to even think about, not to mention saying it out loud. So, what's the plot? Set in rural California, right in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Farmers are being chased from their homes, ruined and impoverished. Entire families had to leave their homes because of the Dust Bowl that took place in the years of 1930s in America. They pour into sunny California, a land of dreams, big ambitions, and big illusions. We follow one family, the Jodes, and as always with Steinbeck, once you meet these characters, you want to be a part of their lives. You want to taste not only their struggle, but also their joy and pride. What never fails to amaze me is how Steinbeck brilliantly blends the immensity of simple joys of humans and the deep grief that all of us experience, the serenity of landscapes and the persistent anger. I noticed something cool about the structure of the novel too. Basically, you have shorter chapters in the beginning and they are followed by longer ones. The short chapters are here to summarize what's going to happen, so the reader already knows what's about to come, but you still can't stop reading. Honestly, I thought I would get bored. Same dry landscape, lots of talk about farming, and agriculture isn't exactly my number one hobby, but somehow I wanted even more. Dry California, and oh, what kept me hooked was the humanity of Jode's family, their inner battle between their better nature and their animal instincts. Ultimately, this book is a depiction of the opposition between the innovation that is being introduced by new technologies and the traditions that persist in families and communities. The big ideas that Steinbeck explores are the dynamic between humans and machines. As I said, tradition and innovation, and how easily can we lose empathy for one another in the harsh conditions of reality. At its heart, the book is about freedom. Even in the driest, hardest places, we still have the freedom to choose to act wisely and responsibly toward one another. Steinbeck turns this story of one family into a powerful call for humanity. This book is a reminder of responsibility and of respect that we owe each other, no matter how hard the reality gets. I don't even know if I can call the next book a book at all. All I know is that I'm grateful that one day, when I was completely bored out of my mind and had no book to pick up, I wandered into a bookstore and saw this tiny little baby, Pray Dangerously by Albert Camus. I bought it instantly and I sat down in the park and read it in one sitting. It's not even a collection of Albert Camus' notes. It's rather the recordings of his speeches and the notes that he took throughout the years. It's a brilliant blend of his thoughts on art. And by art, Camus means everything that a man can create, literature included. Like Sartre, Camus believed that an artist must engage with reality through the creation of art. They must create responsibly and intentionally. Their art must become a part of a struggle for a better future for all. But Camus wasn't naive either. He doesn't pretend to believe that there's some blissful peace waiting at the end of the road. He fully acknowledges the immense suffering that comes with being an artist, the immense struggle of putting into material something that is essentially spiritual. For Camus, the act of creating must involve the whole being of a person. Freedom, thus, is found within oneself. It's also a powerful commentary on social equality and the loss of expression that he witnessed during his lifetime. A brief history lesson, this compilation of speeches and notes concerns mainly the period after and during the Second World War. It was a moment when humanity was redefining itself through violence, terror, and brutal questioning of a price of a new beginning. So when Camus speaks, his words are not just words. They are in themselves an act of engagement, a call for initiative, for responsibility. My personal take, if you're just starting to take interest in Camus' philosophical works, I think it's a great starting point. It's short, concise, yet massively captures the struggle for a better future for all. And as always, nothing beats Camus' prose. The simplicity and the precision of his expression are perfectly balanced with the tenderness and compassion for what's human. In Camus, you don't just find a writer or an academic, you find a human soul. And that's just what's so precious about him. I continue to hold his works very dear to my heart. If you're familiar with Italo Calvino's works, and especially his essays, you might know that he approaches the mere act of creating a novel in a very unique way. Calvino isn't just fascinated with literature itself, he's obsessed with the act of translating it, of publishing it, with the understanding of the writer's process. For Calvino, a novel becomes a mediator between the author and the reader. Even more than that, a bridge between the secret world and one's reality. So, next book I read in the month of April was If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. I read it in French and I want nothing more than to reread it in English. I went into this book completely blind and I suggest you do the same thing. For the moment, I'm just going to give you little hints on what you might expect from the book. First of all, the main character doesn't have any name or any identity whatsoever. He's addressed simply as reader. This creates a participatory, almost metaphysical experience. The plot isn't happening for you, it's happening to you. This book also brilliantly captures the inner workings of publishing industry. Because as I mentioned, for Calvino, writing isn't just a task, it is an act of living. You feel a tender respect for everyone involved. Writers, publishers, translators, editors. Through this plurality of realities and different points of view, Calvino establishes a certain vision of dynamics within the publishing industry and also comments on things such as self-censorship and propaganda. And when I tell you that this book sometimes feels like a feverish dream, I mean it. Sometimes you just get so swept up in the character's confusion, it's almost delirious. The way Calvino drifts from one voice to another, from one reality to another, is deeply mesmerizing. To sum it up and to sound a little bit more intellectual than I actually am, I'm going to borrow a quote from Jean Ricardou, who's a French writer and who actually defined the new novel. And I consider that this novel by Italo Calvino is a perfect representation of that literary movement. The quote is in French. I tried to translate it as best as I could. The novel is no longer a writing of an adventure, but an adventure of writing itself. It's through wordplay that Coelho manages to capture the reader and to reveal the secret reality that is hidden in plain sight. So, if you are into metaphysical books where you become a character yourself, this one is definitely right up your alley. Another book I read in April was Pnin by Vladimir Nabokov. Listen, if I got paid every time somebody recommended this book to me, I would be filthy rich by now. Everyone just adores it and talks about it as if it's the second coming of literature. So when the book finally arrived in mail, I couldn't wait to dive in. I've always loved a good Nabokov novel, and if you watched any of my videos, you already know that. His wit, his language, the way he plays with words, and the words themselves become characters in his novels and they contribute to the reality of the plot is fascinating to me. His writing style has always charmed me. At this point, I've read multiple, if not dozens, of his works, and every time he manages to surpass all of my expectations. Like, genuinely. I finish his books feeling perplexed, excited, and completely mesmerized. And Pnin, absolutely no exception. Quick plot setup. We meet Pnin, a struggling professor of Russian literature and a Russian immigrant. He's searching for a job, gets hired by a university, and rents a little flat. And from there, we follow him through small, scattered incidents from his present as well as from his past. Now, first impressions on Pnin as a character. Honestly, pretty boring and pretty flat. He's awkward, mumbly, confused, constantly distraught, and his English skills non-existent. And so was my will to continue on reading when I first began this novel. However, by the end of the book, I was charmed by Pnin. Pnin's melancholy completely invades you. His anxieties and his existential dread becomes yours. His awkwardness and mumbling nature cease to be a flaw and instead becomes rather endearing. Basically, in someone else's hands, Pnin could have been the most boring book ever. But Nabokov turns every confused anecdote or an existential crisis into pure art and joy even. The number of pages I underlined in this book speaks for itself. It says everything you need to know. However, I must say, Pnin did not become my favorite novel of Nabokov's. Nothing can ever beat Pale Fire for me. Nothing. One of the highlights of this year for me has been discovering Annie Ernaux's works. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. If there's any book of hers that I haven't read, trust me, I will. It is happening. I'm also so glad and appreciative of the fact that I have the ability to read her works in the original language, which is French, because I feel like her style of writing, her wording cannot be repeated and cannot be translated. You hear her voice, you feel her presence in the room, and you recognize her voice and you end up longing for this exact voice. Les Armoires Vides, or Cleaned Out in English, is apparently her first book, and I was blown away by that fact. Like, I'm sorry, Shakespeare could never, as most of her novels are. This novel is heavily based on her own lived experience. A big theme here is identity and memory. Bringing someone else to life naturally makes you question your own past, your actions, and the evolution of one's identity. There's also a strong focus on social emancipation. Annie Ernaux comes from a lower class background, so she had to fight for the mere privilege of being a student, for turning in these academic circles. This struggle through social conventions is present in most of her works. Plot-wise, we follow a young woman who has gone through abortion and is reminiscent on her past. It's essentially a compilation of memories tied to coming of age. Themes of reinvention, rebirth, and being cleaned out of one's own past are everywhere. The main character's striving for new future and new reality for herself turns into contempt and disgust towards her own family. She feels outraged, betrayed, lost. She's caught between two social classes, stuck between two layers, and isn't able to redefine herself. She's also feeling undesirable, unwanted, and rotten. And the language? Oh my god. Arnaud uses specific French dialect and vocabulary to capture the unbearable weight of social conventions. In this novel, the will for emancipation isn't a purely liberating act. It is also a destructive force. A mechanism. Honestly, at times, while reading, I wanted to imprint some of those lines across my forehead so I wouldn't forget them. That's how brilliant and heart-wrenching they were. Somehow this novel was exactly what I needed to read this month. I picked up this book randomly. I saw it in a library and I just thought that I might read it. And I find that it's these accidental encounters with books that mark us most. And Arnaud's voice was exactly what I was longing to hear. I cannot wait to hear more of her this year. And that's a wrap on everything I've read and felt hot for in the month of April. If you read any of these, or if you are this close to impulse buying one of those, let's chat in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. Also, if you have that one book that you have been obsessed with recently, let me know what book this is. I possibly will buy it and possibly will become obsessed with it too. If you enjoyed hanging out with me, consider subscribing and giving this video a like. I would really appreciate that. As always, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for keeping me company. I wish you all the best, and bye!